Hey guys, it's Cece, and today I'm here to talk about the top 20 queer books on my TBR. So I don't know if I can fully describe my methods for constructing this list, because there are some books that I own that I haven't read that are queer that aren't on this list, and you'd think that those would be higher priority than some of the ones I don't own, but that's just not how my brain works. The other thing I want to say is that priority just means, for me, which 20 books I am most eager to read. It doesn't say anything about what I think the quality of that book is going to be. It's just about when I read descriptions of books, these are the top 20 that I'm like, I feel like these are the 20 I am going to love and that have plots that I am most interested in at this current moment. So I recommend a lot of queer books on this channel. I talk constantly about the queer books that I read, but I thought it would be a little bit more fun in this video to talk a bit about some books I haven't read yet. I think it gives a little bit more variety, and maybe these are 20 books that you haven't heard me talk about as much on this channel, or maybe you've never heard me talk about them at all, and that gives you a little bit more, some more titles to go out and look for that maybe I haven't necessarily reviewed yet. I think that that's all I want to do as far as prefacing this video, so I hope you are ready. We are going to talk about 20 books with queer protagonists that I desperately want to read in no particular order. Let's get started. Sorry, wait, one more thing. The last rule that I made for myself before I made this list was that these books had to have been released as of filming this video. So these are all books that have either been released earlier in 2018 or are much older books, but there are no anticipated queer books on this list. We clear? Okay, sorry, now we can get started. The very first book on my list is A Study in Honor by Claire Odell. This book would have been on my anticipated releases back at the beginning of the year, I guarantee you, and I have just grown more excited about it with time. It has a beautiful cover. This book has been exciting to me because I love Sherlock Holmes, I love retellings of Sherlock Holmes, but this puts queer black women at the center of this story, which is absolutely thrilling. So this follows the character of Janet Watson, who was wounded in the new Civil War and has been struggling to adjust to life with a new mechanical arm. While she is struggling to readjust to civilian life, she also finds herself moving in with Sarah Holmes, another queer black woman, and Janet is frequently annoyed with the antics of her roommate. This is a sci-fi retelling of the story that feels almost cyberpunk-esque at times. I love retellings, I love queer women, I love mysteries, I love Sherlock Holmes. This feels like it has kind of everything to me. The next book I want to talk about is Santa Olivia by Jacqueline Carey. I have had this book on my TBR for actual years. I don't know what is taking me this long, but I think it's a testament to how interesting the plot sounds that through so many culls of my TBR, this always remains on there. This is a story about a girl who had a human mother and a father who was genetically engineered by his government to be a weapon, something called a wolfman. Lou is born with some of her father's genetically engineered aspects. She is wolf-like, but one of the things that is most interesting about her genetic manipulation is that she does not have the ability to feel fear. I've heard incredible things about this as far as the way that it uses the main character's lack of fear, the way that Carey restructures the superhero story to be about a Latina woman. It just sounds like a book that is fascinating, that is taking on many different ideas and has been doing it well for so many people, and that is why it has remained on my TBR for as long as it has, but it is part of the top 20. I gotta read it soon. Next up is Here Comes the Sun by Nicole Y. Dennis-Benn. This is a book set in Jamaica at a resort on Montego Bay. It's about a girl named Margot who hustles in order to keep her young sister Tandy in school. Margot is absolutely dedicated to keeping her little sister from the life that Margot has had to lead, and then the possibility of a construction of a hotel threatens the safety of their village. Margot sees it as an opportunity to perhaps get out of the life that she has been living and also a chance to possibly admit her forbidden feelings for another woman. This book has been heralded as an incredible look at classism, homophobia, culture within this particular time and place. I know that there is a great deal of homophobia in this book, so be sure to read trigger warnings and other reviews before you go into it. That probably goes for a lot of these books, but I will try to mention triggers as I am aware of them. It sounds like this book will be heartbreaking, but excellent. Okay, why don't we talk about a contemporary romance, something incredibly light and fluffy that I have very much wanted to read, and that is Marriage of Unconvenience by Chelsea M. Cameron. A lot of you may know that I love Chelsea M. Cameron. She wrote Style, she wrote Cord, both of which just delight my lesbian heart. The extent I know about Marriage of Unconvenience is that it is about two best friends, both girls, who decide to get married for some financial reason. That's right, it is a fake relationship between two girls that is guaranteed to become a relationship between two girls. Fake relationship has long been one of my favorite tropes in the fanfic world, and I always get so thrilled when those particular tropes get brought into, like, publishing. Kelsey Cameron knows how to delight me. She knows how to make me so happy about queer ladies falling in love, and this cover is perfect. I've been dying for this book. Next, I want to move on to Picture Us in the Light by Kelly Loy Gilbert. This is a YA contemporary that I know deals with a lot of things, but particularly it does come with trigger warnings for suicide and depression, so keep that in mind. This has a description that appears somewhat vague, but I know that there are mystery aspects, both in terms of how the main character, Danny Chang, feels that his parents are keeping secrets from him. He's also dealing with tense relationships with his friends as they are reaching a 1-year anniversary of something tragic that shook their friend group. He's also dealing with the fact that he doesn't know if his best friend Harry is really in love with his girlfriend. This is a cast made up of almost entirely Asian main characters. The main character Danny is Chinese American, whose two best friends are Taiwanese American. This is also a book that flies under the gaydar in that you have to do a bit of research before you determine that it does have a queer main character. These stories can be incredibly useful for queer teens and adults who want to read stories about queer characters, but cannot necessarily read books that are openly queer safely. There are a few different places online that have lists of under the gaydar books. I know LGBTQ Reads, which is run by Dahlia Adler, has an incredible collection, but this definitely falls on that list. I know that there is mystery, I know that there is tragedy and mental health, and I think that it's going to be fantastic. It's been getting great reviews. Cece from the future here. In the course of editing this video, I discovered that the book in this spot I had been misinformed about and is not actually queer. So I'm here to give you a different book. This is kind of cheating because as of filming this video originally, this book wasn't released, but now I get to slip it in here because it just barely came out and I get to go meet the author tonight. So next I want to talk about, this is kind of an epic love story by Kheryn Callender. This is a rom-com between two boys who are both queer and are also both people of color. It's about a boy named Nathan who is an aspiring screenwriter and a definite film buff who has decided that too many relationships he's seen have collapsed and he just doesn't believe in romance. Nathan's best friend, then girlfriend, then best friend again while being ex-girlfriend, has decided that she is not going to let Nathan just deny himself a happy ending. So it seems perfect when Nathan's childhood best friend, Oliver Hernandez, moves back into town and Nathan has the chance to mend old wounds and maybe tell Oliver all the things he wanted to tell him years ago. Like I said, this is a rom-com between two boys who are both people of color. The love interest, Oliver, is also deaf. It just sounds like a delightful romance that is going to warm my heart. I am so glad that this is out in the world now and I get to fit it into this list, and I cannot wait to go and pick up my copy and get it signed tonight. So of course this now has to make my top 20 TBR. Sorry about the mix-up, now back to other CC. Next I want to talk about the only non-fiction book on this list, and that is Mean by Myriam Gurba. This is a memoir about Myriam's experience growing up as a queer mixed-race Chicana. I love queer memoirs. It's one of my absolute favorite types of book to read. I think that they are revealing, interesting, and I love connecting to life stories of other queer people through time. I know it is a memoir that addresses sexual assault, racism, misogyny, and homophobia. I also know that it is full of wit and sharp humor and is just another in the line of queer memoirs that I think is going to be deeply fascinating and one that I will love. Moving on now to The Summer We Got Free by Mia McKenzie. This book is on my list because it sounds like a few of my favorite books of all time in terms of sweeping queer narratives. In case you don't know, I'm a big fan of the sweeping queer narrative. So this follows a family called the Delaney's, and they have been ostracized from their community for 17 years after some sort of tragic event that took place, and it has left them feeling confined to their home. And then after these 17 years, a woman arrives at the house and she sort of acts as a catalyst, purging the family, trying to bring life back into them. Ultimately, I think that this book follows a character named Ava, who used to be a passionate artist, and that passion has sort of waned with time. But overall, this serves as an exploration of queer blackness through history and through multiple generations. I read this description and it already sounded fascinating as an exploration of this family over time. I love family narratives, but once I found out it was queer, I was 100% sold. Next, I want to talk about Miss Timmins' School for Boys by Nayana Currimbhoy, which is a mystery set in the 1970s in a small corner of India. It follows a young school teacher who is running from a scandal that her family experienced, who winds up teaching rich Indian girls at this boarding school. She also finds herself falling for another teacher at the school, Moira Prince, a woman who introduces her to the world of hippies, of pot, of rock and roll, and it all seems like this incredible new world that she gets to explore until a body is found near the school, and she is implicated as the murderer. So it is a mystery as multiple students at the school are trying to solve it. It is about exploration of self, and it is just about this contained boarding school in India. I've been finding more and more that I don't love historical fiction in general, but I adore historical fiction that centers on queer narratives, especially ones that aren't about punishing a character necessarily for being queer, but that are allowed to explore that time period and how it centers queerness. That, and as I said earlier, I love a good mystery. Okay, we are now moving into the second half, the next 10 books that I want to talk about, and I am going to move into Under the Udala Trees by Chinelo Okparanta. This book is set in Nigeria and is inspired by Nigerian folk tales as well as the Nigerian Civil War. It is centered on the character Ijeoma, who is 11 before civil war breaks out in Nigeria. When she is sent away to safety, she happens upon another displaced child, and the two rely on each other for strength, but also slowly fall for one another. The problem is that they both come from vastly different communities, and they are both girls. This book has been recommended to me over and over and over again since I started my channel, which is why it has been on my TBR for a while, and why it has always remained a part of this top 20 TBR, despite the fact that it keeps changing over time. It fits into so many of the things I love, being historical, exploring another culture, and also being about a relationship between women. It sounds compelling in every possible way, and has received so many incredible reviews from viewers I trust. Just keep inspiring me. Tell me in the comments again how incredible this book is. I know and I already believe you, but let me know again, because I really am ready to read this. Next, I want to talk about Out of the Blue by Sophie Kheryn. Yes, we actually get to a couple of the books I actually own now. It's very exciting. So this book is about a girl named Jaya, and the day after her mother dies, mysterious beings start to fall to the earth, and not a single one survives. Jaya's father is desperate for a miracle and uproots his family and moves them to Scotland in the hopes of catching one of these beings alive, but Jaya thinks that his obsession is unhealthy and refuses to go along with them. Shortly after this, a being falls from the sky and lands at Jaya's feet, only this one is alive, and Jaya has to make the decision whether she is going to call her father and the authorities, or whether she and her friends will help nurse this being back to health. So this is a story about fallen angels, which is excellent. Very, very, very up my alley. I believe this book follows a character who is bisexual and has cystic fibrosis, and she is falling for a character who is a lesbian and also a person of color. This was also on my most anticipated releases of 2018 list back at the beginning of the year. I bought it as soon as it was released, and it has been sitting on my shelf, cover turned out, for a couple of months now. I've seen Sophie talk more about this book on Twitter. She's assured me that this book uses labels like gay or lesbian to refer to the lesbian character, and that is alarmingly difficult to find, so I cannot wait to read this. Moving on, I want to talk about I Was Born for This by Alice Oseman. I want to thank the fabulous Jane from the channel. It's Jane Lindsay. She sent me this book because she had an extra copy, and I love you. I love you, I love you. I am so excited to read this book. So I read Alice Oseman's book Radio Silence earlier this year, a book which features a bisexual, biracial main character. It also features demisexual and gay side characters, and I loved it, which is why I have wanted to read her newest release. This book follows two main characters. The first is Angel, who loves a band called The Ark. Being a part of the fandom for this band has introduced her to friends. It has given her a place and a direction. It also follows Jimmy, who is the frontman for The Ark, a band that has given him everything which he really needs right now, since it seems like everything else in his life has fallen apart. And then, by random happenstance, Jimmy and Angel are sort of thrust together. The story has interested me because it is written by Alice Oseman. It's also because I've been assured that there's not a romance between Angel and Jimmy, and that wouldn't have been my thing, but since it's just an epic bro-ship the way that Radio Silence was, that's why I've been dying for it. I know that Angel is a hijabi main character, Jimmy is a biracial trans guy. I know that there are a lot of other queer and POC characters as well. I trust Alice Oseman so much after Radio Silence and so much after seeing reviews of this book, so I can't wait to read it. Thank you again to Jane for sending this to me. I'm so excited. Now I want to move on to The House of Impossible Beauties by Joseph Cassara. This book is set in the 1980s in New York City and is centered on the underground ball scene. It is about gay and trans performers. It is a fictionalized account of the House of Extravaganza, which was the first all-Latinx house in the Harlem ball scene. So it is about these characters. It is a character study. It is a study of time and culture, but it is also set during the AIDS crisis. This book has been on my TBR for a while, but Adriana over at the channel Perpetual Pages recently did a video. It was a review and a hearty recommendation of this book, and they recommended it so highly, talked about it so lovingly, which is why I think this got bumped up a little higher on the TBR than it was before. I've been excited about it, but Adriana just completely sold me on this story. Speaking of Adriana from Perpetual Pages, I want to talk about another book that was already on my TBR, but that they did an excellent video about that made me even more hyped for it, and that book is The Air You Breathe by Frances de Pontes Peebles. What a shock that I'm going to talk about a sweeping historical fiction novel that centers on a queer woman. This book at least begins in 1930s Brazil and follows two women, the first of which is Doris, who starts as a young girl working in the kitchens of a sugar plantation, and Graça, the spoiled daughter of a sugar baron. These are two women who come from drastically different worlds, but end up bonding over shared mischief and later on their connection to music. This is a book that follows a lifelong friendship and rivalry as these two women, one of whom is an incredible singer and the other of whom is an incredible composer and lyricist, bond but struggle over this shared passion. Doris, I believe, is bisexual, but I don't think that there is a romance between these two main characters. It is just a part of Doris's character and her life. This, like so many other books I've talked about, highlights my love of queer historical fiction, of sweeping narratives, and of narratives centered on women throughout time. Like I said, this was already very high on my TBR, something I was very excited to read, but Adriana sold me again, the way they always do. We are in the top 5 now, and the next book I want to talk about is Reign of the Fallen by Sarah Glenn Marsh. This is also a 2018 release, but it came out back in January. This is the first part of a YA fantasy series and follows Odessa, who is a necromancer who is supposed to serve the ruling family. Whenever a royal dies, it is Odessa's job to bring them back to life, but there are particular rules of this. The main rule is that when you are brought back, you must remain shrouded at all times, because even if a part of your skin touches the light, you become something called a shade. When more and more shades than normal start popping up in the kingdom, everyone is looking at necromancers to blame, and Odessa goes on a search for the real answer of what's happening in this kingdom. Odessa is also bisexual, and I know that this series features a female-female romance. I've mentioned this book about 100 times. You all know I want to read it. It remains very high on the list, and might just be read pretty soon. Next, I want to talk about Summer Bird Blue by Akemi Dawn Bowman. This book features a main character who is coming to terms with both being asexual and aromantic. She is also multiracial. She is Japanese, Hawaiian, and white. And the supporting cast, as I've read, is mostly people of color. This book follows a character named Rumi who isn't sure of the direction in her life, where she wants to go. The one thing that she knows is that she always wants to be able to write music with her sister, Leia, and then her sister is killed in a tragic car accident. Rumi's mother, while she is dealing with her own grief, sends Rumi away to Hawaii, and she is forced to sort of reconcile her place in the world, her place without her sister, so many miles from home. I'm very excited about a book that features a character who is tentatively, it seems like, both asexual and aromantic. I haven't heard as much about whether or not those terms are used on the page, or if she is just coded as ace and aro, but I do know that her journey in terms of figuring out her identity is included in the book, so that is something that she is figuring out alongside dealing with her grief. I'm sure that this book is going to absolutely break my heart, but considering the fact that it is about a relationship between sisters, I'm pretty excited about it, and I am thrilled to see a character exploring her identity along the ace and aro spectrums. We are getting so close to the end. Next, I want to talk about Spy Stuff by Matthew J. Metzger. Metzger. This is an own voices book featuring a trans guy main character named Anton. And Anton seems absolutely sure that because he is trans, he is never going to get a happy ending. Which is why Anton is surprised when Jude asks him out. Jude, who he thought was straight, and Jude, who doesn't appear to be joking. The only problem is that Anton isn't so sure that Jude knows he's trans. This is a male-male romance that comes so highly recommended. I have yet to read anything else by Matthew J. Metzger, but I think that this book is the most highly recommended of his, which is why it is the one I absolutely want to read first. Next, I want to talk about The Trouble by Daria DeFore, which is a novella about a guy named Danny Kim. He's the frontman of a Seattle indie rock band, and he is also struggling to get through college. So, when he sort of rudely hits on a guy after a show, he thinks that's going to be the end of it, until he finds out that that guy is actually the TA of his accounting class. Ji-yoon kind of never wants to deal with this guy again, but circumstances throw them together anyway, and they wind up becoming close. Danny is aromantic, and I'm really, really excited to read a story that is about a relationship between Danny and Ji-yoon, but a relationship beyond the traditional romantic bonds that we normally see relationships develop. So this title came to me from, this is going to shock absolutely no one, Adriana. I saw them talk about this in a video and was immediately super invested in getting my hands on this story. I'm also excited because both of the main characters are Korean American, and I have been out here looking for stories about aromantic main characters, and they are hard to track down. But I absolutely trust Adriana, which is how this wound up so high at the top of my TBR so quickly. And the final book that I'm going to talk about in this incredibly long video is Running with Lions by Julian Winters. This book is about a guy named Sebastian who is the star goalie of his school's soccer team. He is a senior, he feels like he is living his best life, he is supported by his teammates, he's never asked to hide his sexuality, and then his estranged best friend Amir moves in and joins the team. Sebastian figures out that he's going to have to reconcile differences with a guy who hates him if he wants the team to keep succeeding, but finds that through reconciliation, maybe more than just friendship happens between the two of them. This is an enemies to lovers sports romance, which is something I've been very excited about. I think that it sounds reminiscent of Check Please, one of my absolute favorite webcomics, and now graphic novels ever. I'm so proud of Check Please. But enemies to lovers is a favorite trope of mine. Sports romances have been few and far between, especially for queer main characters, and this one has been getting every ounce of the hype. So here's hoping that I get to read it sooner rather than later. Okay guys, that is it. That is my top 20 queer TBR. I know this was a long one, but I hope that you have discovered so many new titles of books that you want to read. Have you read any of these books already? Let me know down in the comments below. And are there any books that should have been on this list that weren't? Recommend me some titles. You know that I'm always looking out for them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!